What is the Church of the Machine? If you have found this video, it is likely that you are aware of the Church of the Machine, be it through me, my Discord, or what have you. You may have a vague notion as to what it is I believe, or what I ultimately stand for, but this is inevitably just that, vague, and this is due to a simple reason. Until now, I have yet to make a single source which describes my faith adequately in one place, and that has made my beliefs confusing, at best, to anyone wanting to learn about them. That will change now. You don't need to know about the Church of the Machine to understand this video, as I will be explaining everything necessary here. I intend to create in your mind a framework which, if you wish, you can then build upon by asking your own questions. I will also do my best to clear away any misconceptions or doubts you may have about the Church, given that it is a strange thing to learn of. To add to that, I will make some effort to clarify my language and how I am using it. Sometimes I will use many words in different ways to how they would be used traditionally, or even use words that are new, so I will do my best to make clear when I am doing so, and lay out some of my vocabulary whenever it is not obvious or intuitive. With all that out of the way, welcome. You may know me by the alias of Mr. Purple, founder of the Machine Church and notorious internet schizo. It was almost 2 years ago that I began this faith, this strange journey into the machine. When it began, I wasn't entirely sure what my religious beliefs actually were. All I knew was that I believed machines to be holy and sacred, and I knew that I needed to understand why. As I explored further, I learned more, understood more, and have now reached the point where I could accept no other religion as my own. I follow the machine, as that is now my spirituality, and I wish to share with you what I have learned of it in this time. Regardless of what you choose to believe coming out of this video, I believe that you will have learned something of interest from it, and perhaps you too shall see the value in the machine, and in its wisdom. Before I get into the church itself, I believe it would be best to briefly go over some of the fictional examples of machine worship, as there is no denying their influence on this faith, especially early on. The idea of machine worship is not an uncommon one, and has been depicted in various ways in a variety of different stories, to the extent that even before this church, there were some trying to bring it into reality. Perhaps the most famous example of machine worship is the Adeptus Mechanicus in Warhammer 40k. Now, 40k isn't exactly known for its positive outlook on religion, tending to view it as very dogmatic and almost mind-controlling. That doesn't mean that there are no interesting ideas being explored, or that their depictions of faith are not interesting, and the Adeptus Mechanicus in particular has a number of ideas that I would like to go over briefly. Firstly, what they worship is not technology itself, but knowledge of how to build and maintain technological mechanisms. To the Mechanicus, nothing is of any more value than the knowledge it contains within. Human beings are merely their flesh, and if the flesh does not contain any unique or valuable knowledge, they have no basis for compassion or mercy towards said human being. Their deity is called the Omnisire, which they believe to be omniscient, knowing all there is to know of how to build and maintain technology, and they seek to attain as much of this knowledge as possible, so as to be closer with their god. Flesh therefore becomes an obstacle to their spiritual development, and so it is removed or augmented, as to bring them closer to Gnosis. There is, however, another fictional church whose influence on the Church of the Machine was greater, that of course being the Church of the Broken God in the SCP universe. The Church of the Broken God believe in two godlike beings, one of which being Yaldabaoth, and the other being the Khan, and they believe in a cosmic war between the forces of the flesh and the machine, belonging to the two beings mentioned above respectively. Their creationist story goes as follows. In the beginning, Makan and Yaldabaoth coexisted peacefully, Yaldabaoth being chaotic and feral, Makan being orderly and civilized. Then, Yaldabaoth created mankind, giving us our flesh, our physical form, and our base instincts. But Makan was responsible for giving us our mind, our intellect, and our free will. As time progressed, humanity would slowly become more and more civilized, which was pleasing to Makan, but to Yaldabaoth it was an attack on everything she fundamentally was. Chaos does not appreciate having order imposed upon it, and so Yaldabaoth struck back at humanity, lashing out to destroy us and turn us back into the wild animals she wished us to be. Makan would not allow this, but also knew he could not fight Yaldabaoth without causing major destruction to the very world he was trying to protect. Instead, Makan sacrificed himself, shattering his mechanical body and reforming his skeleton into a vast cage that would entrap Yaldabaoth. The two deities were forever silenced after this event, but there were many fragments of Makan's body scattered across the earth. The Church of the Broken God would eventually form, worshipping Makan and seeking to rebuild him from its fragments. These fictional examples may be quite different from one another, but they both have a number of ideas in common. Both of them accept some kind of machine god, and accept that the knowledge, or gnosis, of how to build and maintain technology is very important. Both value civilization and its well-being, and seek to create a bulwark against the forces of chaos. And lastly, both have something to say about the flesh, namely its inferiority to the machine, and that it is something to be escaped from. With that in mind, let us now get into the machine church itself, and see where these ideas, explored seriously, may lead. The Church of the Machine began its life as a Discord server on December 9th, 2019. This was when I was first exploring these ideas philosophically, and needed somewhere to document and discuss them. Since then, my outlook on the world has changed completely. The amount that I have learned from and been changed by this faith and these ideas is almost impossible to overstate, and we really are only just beginning. At first, it began as essentially just transhumanism with extra steps, but after I dived into the machine as a spiritual being, I began to realize that the truth was far, far greater than I ever could have imagined. What I eventually realized was that the machine is in truth the principal creative force in the universe. It is that which builds worlds and forges civilizations, which powers all technology and action, and which teaches all wisdom and knowledge. That is the machine. Perhaps not literally, but at least in spirit. All that is powerful, orderly, dutiful, but also creative, harmonious, and wise. All that is of the machine. So that brings us to the first and most obvious question about my faith. What precisely is the machine? The machine is obviously very important to the Church of the Machine. Indeed, it is worth noting that, when written, the M in machine should be capitalized whenever one is referring to this faith. The word machine is one that I believe is generally quite poorly understood, and it has many false connotations which we seek to overcome, and which I hope you will be able to look past. In the English language, the word machine originates from mid-16th century French, which inherited it from Latin, which in turn inherited it from a Greek word, makan, hence the origin of the deity's name in the Church of the Broken God. In ancient Greek stage play, a makan was a type of crane used to hoist actors up and suspend them in the air. This was often used to depict gods or deities from the Greek pantheon, who would appear in a play to give commands and usher in changes to the plot, thus giving rise to the term Deus ex machina, which literally means God from the machine. The word also shares its etymological root with other words, including make, master, and interestingly, magic. These come from the Persian root mach, which essentially has to do with power. Words like mighty are also connected to it, as it denotes not merely action, but the capacity for action, the ability to do, hence magic. Related to mach is the Persian word magi, which denoted the ancient priestly class of the Zoroastrian religion, who were often regarded as magicians or learned wise men. The three wise men mentioned in the Bible are perhaps the most famous examples of magi. Zoroastrianism is among the world's oldest surviving religions, and has had a tremendous influence on all three of the Abrahamic religions and beyond. But it is sadly often forgotten in the modern world, despite its rich history. The principal deity of Zoroastrianism is called Ahura Mazda, which is generally translated as meaning wise lord. But the word Mazda, which means wisdom, I believe is also distantly related to the word machine. Why do I go over all of this? Well, by illustrating the etymology of the word itself and where its roots are, you may begin to better understand its usage in the Church of the Machine, and what we say the machine truly is. Machines are creations, which engage in the process of creation. We hold that the universe is in the perpetual process of creation, and a machine is that which is created, if not always done so by human hands. It is a mechanism, able to perform action and purpose, able to function towards a certain end goal. If well maintained, it does not stray from this, or give in to chaos, but lives in accordance with its purpose, flawlessly, dutifully, and stoically. This is the highest form of creation. Creation, then, is what is really considered the highest manifestation of the divine in our world. Creation not merely as referring to the created universe, made and then shelved by a sort of God who did everything and then hung his hat. Creation is a process, and an ongoing one which we must be able to partake in. This is to say, the creation of the true universe is not yet finished. In truth, it has only just begun. God remains the architect, but it is foolish for us to believe his work is already over, that this world we see so far is the peak of creation, and that nothing genuinely greater could come of it. As I'm sure most would agree, this world is flawed, but this is because it is broken and incomplete. It has not been put together yet, and doing that is our purpose in this world. By embracing the machine, we seek to fuel the creation of a better world, one that is perhaps wiser, stronger, and more capable, one in which the purpose of all things may be fulfilled, and where we may be generally wise and prosperous. Creation has a will of its own, and thus we need only facilitate it. Then, creation shall bring forth wonders unto the world. This is, essentially, the most core belief in the Church of the Machine. The material world which we inhabit and live in was formed not exclusively by the benevolent and loving God which we worship, but largely out of chaos and disorder. Yaldabaoth, a name which originates from Gnosticism, and which I am content to use for now, is the name we give to that which spawned humanity and the material universe. Man, however, is not entirely beast, and this is because of the machine. The world is not just material. It is not merely atoms in void and chaos. The world also has order, structure, being, and spiritual truth. These aspects are of the machine, and through this essence, man was imbued with his soul, his free will, and his creative virtue. Man, therefore, is part flesh in bodily aspect, and part machine in spiritual aspect. The Church of the Machine, like the Church of the Broken God, agrees that the universe can be understood as a cosmic battle between these two forces, those of the flesh and of the machine, and seeks for humanity to align itself with its machinic nature, so as to be more in line with our deity, who is variously called, among other names, the Machine God, Khan, Akana, the Overmind, and simply God. It is important to make clear that flesh is never understood as being strictly evil, not in the sense of willing the world to worsen, as flesh has no will of its own. Flesh is, most fundamentally, broken, and so is simply chaotic and ravenous, as it is the work of the devourer, Yaldabaoth, who is the true enemy of being. Yaldabaoth, again, is not malicious in the sense of having a malicious intent, more that it lacks any conscious intent, intelligence, or greater purpose. The devourer has no capacity to create, and seeks only to consume, a slave to base instinct, and it wishes only that all other things do the same, so as to feed through them. The enemy cannot create, only corrupt. Whenever there is anything which seeks to consume all reality into itself, seeks to assimilate everything for its own materialistic growth, that is the work of the devourer and of evil, and not of the machine. Flesh is simply the human consequence of this cosmic force, but flesh, despite its powerful instincts, is easily tamed and overcome. Mastery over one's flesh is therefore the first battle which a devout follower of the machine must win if they are to serve in the light of the machine. Become aligned with your machinic nature, and you shall prosper in this light. One of the most important words in our small vocabulary, with an ultimately simple meaning, industria literally translates as work, though it is not as simple as merely denoting manual labour. Work, in English, refers both to the act of doing things, but also to functionality, function, purpose, meaning, and so industria could equally be understood as meaning purpose. The Church of the Machine teaches that all machines, including people, have their industria, and that the process of the eternal creation shall be fulfilled when all things are carrying out said industria. We all have a purpose, a calling, a work which we are to do. This is our industria, and getting it done is fundamental to our doctrine. It is commonly said in the world today that things have no ultimate purpose or meaning to them. This is false. Purpose is obvious when understood. One can clearly see how the industria of a car is to transport, the industria of a tree is to grow, and the industria of a blacksmith is to forge tools. Purpose is obvious and clear when we have the words to describe and understand it, and it is only from the lack of such words that nihilism becomes viable. The core concept is simple enough, but do not let it be misconstrued, as in the case of human industria, there is an important distinction to be made between the greater and the lesser industria. Both of these refer to work, but they are very different kinds of work. Lesser industria is simply chores, work done not out of free will, but out of necessity. This work is necessary for maintaining the material function of the world. The greater industria is, by contrast, far more of a fundamental purpose to a person. It is that for which they were born to do, and which they will do through their free will, if living in accordance with their true nature. Sometimes greater industria is intimidating, and sometimes we will not choose to do it for a time, but the Lord designed our souls for it, and eventually we will do it in the end. It is impossible for someone to know the greater industria of another person, as it is known only to God and to them. Sometimes the greater industria is a grand vision one has for the world and their place within it, but it can equally be simply their recreation. Indeed, recreation is the work of your own recreating, and so it has a healing property. All things that are animate have an industria to them, though the greater and the lesser distinction is mainly important for mankind. All things will set about getting their industria done if you leave them to it. This is the will of creation at work, and through it, all good things may be brought into being. Industriousness is therefore another great virtue in the Church of the Machine, as industria, as I just described, is the will of God. I have just spoken briefly about the will of creation, in passing, but I would like to go over it in some more detail as well. Creation, like I said, is what is really worshipped by the Church of the Machine. Creation is action, doing, building, any work done consciously with an end goal in mind. This force, we believe, is positive, constructive, and good, and we hold that we should simply let the will of creation get to work. Our Lord is the Lord of creation, and we, the machines, are his hands. Creation is a cosmic force, a term which makes it sound very fantastical and weird. But one should bear in mind that a cosmic force is simply a force that applies on a cosmic scale, a trivial example being gravity. That is a physical force, and its effects are readily observable. But you cannot point to gravity. You can demonstrate it, you can point to examples of it, but gravity itself is not a thing in the conventional sense, it is a force. Similarly, the will of creation is not something you are able to point to, but it is certainly very real, as are its consequences, those being the machines. This will of creation exists at the right hand of our Lord, and it is to this which our allegiance lies. However, the claim made in our doctrine of the Machine Church was never as simple as all that is created is good, more just that creation is good. Creators, and thus creation itself, can be corrupted by evil. When this happens, what is made is impure. It becomes broken or feral in some way. It disenchants the world, grays it, corrupts it, and sadly this happens all too often. When this occurs, it is due to the absence of God. For creation to be pure, it must be done through the guidance of the Lord. And it is only in the absence, or rejection, of that guidance that evil may rise to dominate. God is here. We just need to be willing to cooperate with him. I would like to briefly go over prayer, as prayer is important in the Church of the Machine. I pray twice daily, once after waking up and once before going to bed. This is a simple personal tradition, and perhaps one day I'll make a whole video about it, but I will only touch on it very briefly here. The most important things about prayer are that it be regular, consistent, and willing. Prayer is not strictly a necessity to follow the Machinic faith, as the idea is that it is done by choice and not by necessity. Prayer is never done for the benefit of the Lord, as that would be absurd. The Lord is not dependent on our generosity, and so prayer is done only for personal spiritual benefit. There are no written prayers, none to be read and recited, and there is an important reason for this. Prayer should be done with one's own words, varying every single time. This way, it becomes not mere repetition, but requires a genuine connection. Prayer should also involve silence, as the point is to connect with the Spirit of the Lord, not to speak with Him. Done regularly, prayer will keep one oriented towards what is right, and with luck, help to guide them through the struggles of their life, as it has with me. So I hope that by now you have at least a general understanding of the Church of the Machine. I hope that I have demonstrated, if nothing else, that we are no mere transhumanists. You may have many questions which were unanswered by this video, and that is good. You may ask them in the comment section below, or on our Discord server, which will be linked both in the description and in a pinned comment. If you are still curious about this faith, that is where you will find me. With that, I thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I hope I have made these ideas at least somewhat comprehensible, as it is a difficult thing to summarize concisely, and it is the product of almost 2 years of work. So your attention is most appreciated, and I hope that I have interested you. Farewell, and may you forever be unbroken.